Coming to you from KPO Studio of Atlanta, Georgia. I'm your host, Darrell Pastor G. Gitron. Get ready for another experience, another episode of Another Brother's Story. To God be the glory. Pastor, it's an awesome opportunity to have you to share with us today. Thank you for being here and sharing it. You don't know my story.
Bless you, man.
And the world don't know your story. And so, first of all, before we go into your story, who is Pastor Thomas? Who is Norman Thomas?
Good question. Well, thank you again. I want to tell you thank you for even giving me an opportunity to just talk about it. And you and your son, both of you all, have been a blessing to us at First Baptist. So I just want to tell you thank you for that. And you have been since I've known you. So thank you for being who you are.
To God be glad.
But I guess to describe me, I love God. You know, I'm a Christian, of course. And I have accepted Christ at the age 12.
Okay.
So I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a son and a brother. And, you know, I'm an educator and pastor by the grace of God.
Right.
And I do mean by the grace of God.
Yes.
So I just that's how I would describe myself. I'm just one of God's servants trying to do whatever it is He wants me to do.
Okay. I noticed you said, and you put emphasis on the fact that you are a pastor by the grace of God.
Yes, sir.
There's something behind that. Why are you a pastor by the grace of God? And in addition to that, I noticed I've always, when you would speak, you would give nuggets sometimes of your life, which has led to this. Right. Because I would often hear, and I was like, wow, there's so much that's still there. Of another man, seemingly, that has some kind of way transformed into this new man.
That's good.
Okay, so
and, yes, and I think it amazes me, and I think I'm a good example of God's grace, mainly because I'm not too good at a lot of stuff, and I said I'm a pastor by God's grace. Sometimes I often wonder why God called me.
Right.
Not being one who, was very outgoing. I've been kind of quiet for the majority of my life. Okay. Now, I like to joke. I like to play. Now, that's one thing I love to do. I love some humor.
Right. Yeah, you do real good with that, too.
Yeah, I love it.
That's job number 2.
That is. So, but I realized that God put me here, and I'm here by His grace, because I don't have the leadership skills. I don't have all of the great things that people will say, and I say, well, Lord, you sure have a sense of humor and put me in a position.
Right.
And people are kind to me and say nice things, but at the same time, I realize that without God, I'm nothing. I don't amount to too much.
Right.
And but I do recognize too that if God put me in has given me certain opportunities, that I'm to use whatever I have to His glory. So that's what I try to do. I just try to use whatever I have to His glory.
Gotcha. You were born to educators. Your mother and your father?
That's right.
Okay. How was that growing up in the house with educators as your parents? I mean, now you are, and that became your path. So how was that growing up with educators as parents?
It was all I knew. So it wasn't anything abnormal, because that's all I knew.
That's all you knew, right.
And now that I look back on it, I'm grateful for the times they corrected my grammar. That I had to do. I didn't like it, but I had to do book reports in the summer. Couldn't stand to do that. Mama would make me do.
Okay.
My sister and I both would have to do book reports. Go to the library, get a book, and do a book report, and write it out before we could go outside. Couldn't stand it, but it also helped with my reading, helped with my comprehension. My parents were not overbearing, but whatever they said, they meant it.
Right.
So it just gave me a sense of security that I could trust whatever they said. You said they're gonna give me something, they gave it to me.
Right.
If it were a consequence, then it was a consequence. I always had my grammar corrected, you know.
Right.
Even though I grew up in Decatur, where it's greater.
Right.
You know, and I can, you know, we can flip the script when we need to.
Right. Right.
But I'm glad that they kind of, you know, kept me on understanding what standard English is and understanding the language that you may have with your friends and so forth.
Right.
So it was good, and it taught me different perspectives. That they were. You know, my mother was a classroom teacher before she became a principal. My father was like an area superintendent.
Okay.
And my sister is a principal, of course.
Right.
So we had different perspectives in the house.
Right.
And we would just hear things from, you know, I would come home, especially after I started teaching while I was still living at home. I would come home and complain about the work that the principals gave.
Right. Right.
And my mother would say, well, you have to understand that we have to have it like this because we're getting pressure from the top.
Right.
And my dad would say, well, you have to understand where we're getting the pressure, that the board is directing us to do certain things. So it helped to broaden my perspective and understanding of what education is all about.
Right. Right.
And one thing my dad would tell me every day I left for work when I first started teaching, he'd always say, save the children. And that stayed with me every day I went to work. Whether it was teaching or whether it was even as an administrator, my goal was to make sure I did everything I could to save a child, to give them the very best that I could give them.
Wow. Not only were your parents educators, you came up in a faith-based home.
Absolutely.
Okay. So how was your early experience of coming to God, learning God, knowing God? Where is your first recollection of learning and knowing God and accepting Christ?
That's good. My mother was the catalyst for that.
Okay.
My mom made sure that we went to church every Sunday. At a certain point, you know, she made sure that the family got up and went to church. Okay. And I remember our rule, even when we didn't go to church, our rule in the house was, you can't go outside. You know, if we don't go to church, you can't go outside until after 12.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I rule too. Wow.
And part of that was we don't want the neighbors to see that we didn't go to church. so you stay in until at least 12 o'clock, and then you can go outside.
Yeah. Okay.
But I remember days when I would just, you know, I'd be like, you know, can I please go outside? It would be 11 o'clock, and I said, no, can't go out until after 12. But anyway. I said, well, we might as well go to church since I can't go outside and play. So eventually we started going to church every Sunday. And and mom and dad would teach us about God and teach us, you know, who God was. And that's how I grew to know him, you know, having to sit there and listen to Reverend Shepherd.
Okay.
And it was just an interesting experience. Now, that was my introduction to God. There was some other... It was another.
How old were you?
My introduction to God was real young.
Okay.
You know, 2, 3, 4 years old.
Okay.
But then, as far as me accepting Christ for myself, that didn't come until I understood the impact of not having Christ in my life, and that was around the age of 12 when I gave my life to Christ. Okay. For myself.
Okay. And why did you do that? Do you remember?
Oh man, interesting story.
Okay.
So here's a story.
Okay.
My friend and I had gone to a basketball game. My friend, his dad would have different stuff laying around the house, and he had on this particular day, he had a gun laying around the house. So we decided we were going to take the gun with us, you know, to this basketball game. We were in the 7th grade. So we walked and had the gun, but the game we were going to was in a church. So we said, we're not going to take the gun in the church. You know, we still had a little bit of respect.
Right, yeah, respect.
So we hid the gun in some grass and went on to the game. And then by the time we were walking back home, it was night.
Right.
So we looked for that gun and could not find the gun at all. So we said, okay, well, you know, we'll just try to look for it in the morning. Well, I went on home, he went home, and around 12 o'clock at night, the doorbell rings. and it's this guy's dad, my best friend's dad, and he's asking my dad to answer the door. He's like asking my dad, do you know anything about my gun? Have you seen my gun? My dad said, no, I don't know anything about a gun.
Right.
So he explained what happened.
Right.
And my daddy called me up. He said, son, do you know anything about a gun? So at that time, I just kind of dropped my head like, oh, man.
Wow.
Lord, have mercy. And anyway, make a long story short, I told him that we did have a gun, but we laid it up in the field, didn't know where it was. And, you know, we just had to try to find it in the morning.
Right.
So he left. My daddy was like, dude, you know, what's your problem, man?
Right, right.
You know, you could have, you are walking around with a gun, and anything could have happened to you.
Right.
You could have been killed. You know, gun could have accidentally gone off. You or your friend could have been killed. So, you know, you got to know better than that. You have to use more common sense than that. But then my mom, when she heard the conversation, she was brokenhearted because she's looking at it. This is my baby boy, and she's looking at it to say that, you know, son, something could have happened to you. So she got so upset and so distraught that she couldn't say too much to me, and that broke my heart. That sent me into a tailspin. Broke my heart. She didn't say too much to me. I went to bed, woke up the next morning, and I remember I was laying on the couch watching cartoons, and she just kind of dropped her head when she walked by. She couldn't say anything to me, as if she couldn't sleep at night, and it just totally crushed my spirit. Right. So it was at that time that I said, okay, Lord, I need to get myself together, and that's when I called on God. I went back to my room, got on my knees by myself for the first time, and I asked God to enter into my life, Christ to enter into my life, and that's what changed my life. From that day on, I wasn't a perfect child, but things started turning around. I became a little bit more honest. I started reading my Bible every day, and that's when it started. I would read my Bible every single day, and it's something that I've tried to keep up since 12, reading, praying every night, and just trying to develop that relationship with God, simply because my mom's heart was broken, and that kind of brought me to a point where I said I gotta do change something in my life.
Wow.
So that's what did it. That's what got me into a relationship with Jesus Christ for myself.
You know, that's awesome, because that shows that you had not only a reverence for God, but a respect for your parents, because some kids that wouldn't bother them, which, you know, you're disappointed, crushed or whatever, but for that to even lead you to a closer relationship with God, you know, awesome. Well, now I'm not gonna say average, but there are some cases where if a child was found having some kind of dealings with any other property, especially a gun, you know, belonging to somebody else, that they probably would get the rod.
Absolutely.
Or whatever. So you make mention how growing up in a faith-based home with educators, you know, and I know you came up with discipline, right?
Oh, man.
And I've heard your dad make reference to it. I've heard you make reference to it before. So how did discipline come into that situation and just your life coming up? So
let me share this. My parents were very organized and very I don't know how to explain it. They were very organized, and to say the least, there were certain parameters that were drawn. You step over the parameters, you got consequences. Now, my mother would get on to it. She would whip us and that kind of thing. But when my daddy whipped me, left a lasting impression, brother.
Wow.
Oh man, that, you know. So, but one thing it taught me is to have, and I respected both of my parents, but my dad had to let me know that he's the dominant male in the house. Right. And I appreciate that. He had to let me know, son, you know, and it wasn't a thing where he was trying to do that. He was simply, I'm your daddy. Right. You know, I love you, son, and I care about you, but I have to correct your behavior. Right. And, you know, I would get whippings, but I would get whippings. And it totally changed my perspective, because I could have gone, because my dad got to a point and said, you can't hang with those people no more.
Right.
It wasn't getting an attitude. I couldn't get an attitude, at least not in his presence, without there being some consequences.
Right.
Talking about the rod.
Right.
I mean,
That's right.
Daddy did not play, and I always respected that he corrected me, but there was never a grudge. Once he did it, that was it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not mad at you. I'm not gonna walk around not talking to you, not speaking to you. I'm gonna correct you. I'm gonna tighten you up.
Right.
I'm gonna love you.
Right.
You know, if you want to get something to eat afterwards, we're good.
Right.
You know, but you know that I'm the one in control in this situation.
Right.
I always appreciated that, and it changed my life. It
Awesome.
just definitely changed my life.
Man.
And in that situation with the gun, he didn't whip me that time.
Okay.
He didn't whip me. I was 12, and it wasn't a thing where I was trying to be bad.
Right.
I just did something bad.
Right. Mr.
So yeah, and he didn't whip me that time.
Okay.
His conversation with me let me know I'm disappointed.
Right. Good.
And that kind of changed my perspective.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome. So your when you would get disciplined, when you would get punished, the rod, how did you feel toward your parents or towards your dad at that time? I know you would learn to appreciate him now, and you would say you would go back and you find yourself, you know, he dropped it, you know.
Right.
But how did you feel towards him at that time, if you can remember, when he would discipline you, you know, after something you've done?
How would I feel? There would always be a feeling of anger to some degree.
Right.
But it also
At him or at yourself?
Most of the time it was at him.
Okay.
Now sometimes I would be mad that I got caught.
Right. Okay.
You know, but it was mostly angry, and I think that's the rebellious nature of us.
Right.
You know, we don't get mad usually. You know, it takes a heck of a person to get mad at themselves, and they, especially a child. Dog, I shouldn't have done that. But we usually get mad at the person who issues the consequences. So I would get angry, but he would never know I was angry. If I got mad, I would go close my door, put the pillow over my head, and mumble under my breath, then real quietly.
Right.
But at that time, I would get a little upset with him, not always understanding that he had to do it.
Right.
You know, if he didn't correct it then when I turned 41 like I am now, I would still have the mindset that I can do whatever I want to do,
Right.
and without consequence. So it helped me out a lot. But back then, I won't say I fully understood everything that he did.
Right. But that's good, and that's going to help somebody, some father, you know, who's dealing with his children or his son, you know, as well as helping the young people appreciate, you know, I mean, because and we're getting there, but you've turned into this phenomenal man of God, you know, and these are some of the early stages, you know, and things that you dealt with just like everybody else, you know, had to deal with. Now, how was your relationship with your dad, just coming up teenage years or whatever? I talk to a lot of people, and you're blessed tremendously to have to have both your parents in the household, and still yet your dad is a deacon here at the church.
That's right.
That, you know, and advocate, you know, for you as well as First Baptist. How did that come? How did that relationship come to be? As strong a bond, or I mean, it's a nice thing to watch,
Right.
You know, even his love and support for you.
Right. He is. He's my superhero, and I've always looked at him as being that strong person who, even if he didn't have the answers, he would find the answer. Who gave us guidance, who directed us. Mom put the love in my heart. Mom was the one who, you know, she gave me the love and the sensitive part where I could, you know, be compassionate toward people. Daddy gave me the discipline and the role model. You know, you follow me. I'm gonna show you which way to go. And he would tell me, you know, what I appreciated most about him, what things he would tell me is you can't be like everybody else.
Right.
You can't look like everybody else. You can't follow and do what everybody else does.
Right.
As long as you're in this house, you're gonna follow my example and do what I ask you to do. And then once you branch out, you're on your own. You can do whatever you want to do. But he was always there, and that's the one thing I always appreciated. He was always there. You know, games. Homework, even when he had to traveling with his job. You know, mom and dad. Mom was there for everything, of course, but daddy was there, just knowing he was there to support, and knowing that you also had somebody who was going to discipline you and hold you accountable for what you didn't do right. That just gave me a, you know, having somebody looking over your shoulder, knowing that somebody's watching, you know, it changed the way I did things and the way I operated. And he was my best man in my wedding.
Are you serious?
My daddy was my best man in my wedding. I couldn't think of a better man than to ask to be the best man in the wedding of my dad.
Wow.
Yeah. And he's still my best man.
That's good.
Yes, sir.
That's awesome.
Yes, sir.
You know, he feels the same way about you when you preach. He's standing up. You know, and I told him one time you had to preach at some guest church, and I was in the back and I saw him up front and he was standing. You know, I made my way towards the front, and just always supportive. I mean, just standing there. He is your encourager, you know, and he always speaks about sunshine. You know, living in your sunshine, and being sunshine. You know.
Hey, I want you to know that I'm continuing to live in my sunshine and letting my light shine as I live in the sunshine of my life.
And I'm telling you, that's not something that is just words. You can look at him and then see you and see that some kind of way, through whatever means, he has given that to you. You know, you know, and but then in the flip, you have this awesome respect for him. You know, I watch when he's talking and whatever, and there's this, even though you pastor, there's this humility, this humbleness, you know, humility that takes place, and you're watching him, and you know, and giving him his chance to speak and whatever. And even when you're speaking, you know, about your parents, that's wonderful. And not too many. You got your and I'm gonna go here. You have your parents here working in ministry, as well as your parent-in-laws.
That's right.
Okay. All right. So let's go there for a second. You were married to
Rhonda Thomas.
Rhonda Thomas.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Yes.
How did that come to be? You know, because I mean, not only does she love you, her parents love the mess out of you because they're here working.
Praise the Lord for that.
I mean, there's something about this man here that, you know, that has captivated them so for years.
Wow.
Yeah, man.
And sometimes I wonder why they still support
you
me.
All right.
but here's the thing. So Rhonda and I grew up in Greater Travelers Rest together. We've known each other since we were 8 or 9 years old.
Okay.
And we, you know, of course, we weren't always lovey-dovey toward each other and liking each other, but we grew up as friends. We played softball on the same team. We sang in the choir together. You know, we ushered together. We, you know, had different youth ministry activities together. So we grew up in the church together. Our parents, all of us, were together, and it just gave. It helped me to see. You know, she knew what she was getting, and I knew what I was getting. And I was, you know, she was able to watch my parents. I was able to watch her parents. Very important. And it was, you know, we just observed each other, and then we were more so just best friends all the way up through. Well, we became best friends probably in college. We were like best friends, and she would give me advice actually about my girlfriend, about the girl I was dating.
Are you serious?
And it must not have been that good of advice because she got me. But anyway,
could have been a conspiracy.
Conspiracy. But she would always give me some very sound advice, just wise advice, even if it were my fault. She would say, you didn't handle that properly. Wow. And I just started saying, man, I love this girl. You know, I love her more than just a friend. And I thought about if, I never forget thinking, if somebody else marries her, I'm going to be mad. So I said, I can't have some other dude getting her. Wow. So it got to that point where I said, listen, I'm going to Now I played games for a while, as every, I won't say every, as a lot of men do. You know, you go back and forth, do this, that, and the other. But then, you know, it got to a point where I said I can't function properly without her. And this is the one that God has given me to be my wife. And if I mess up on this one, I'm in bad shape. So after I think we were 27, when we finally decided we were gonna get married. I knew when I was about 18, but I had some maturing to do.
Right.
Yeah, I had some maturing to do because I wasn't ready then.
Okay, so between 18 and 27 and playing games, what were some of these games you were playing?
Oh man, I dated different girls
at the same time.
Oh yeah, I had different girls at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Romeo.
In college, I won't say maybe Casanova. I don't know, but but different girls in college.
Right. Okay.
Just going out with different people. We go dating and.
But that's just dating. What do you call games? So that's just what you call. That's just dating.
So the game was not letting the other ones know that I was messing with somebody across town.
Right.
So that's the game.
Right.
Or I'm gonna keep you over here while I got this one over here.
Right.
And don't ask me too many questions. That's what I would.
Right.
You keep your business, I keep mine.
Right.
But we cool though.
Right.
We cool.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of mentality that I had trying to mature.
Okay. Yeah.
And be learning what actually being a man is all about.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so you knew at 18 that she was the one. At 18, she was the one. But you also knew you had to mature something. So you wasn't ready.
That's right. I knew I wasn't ready.
Okay.
It's just like I knew when that I was going to be called into the ministry. But I knew that when I found out that I was going to be called, that I wasn't ready yet. And God was having to prepare me for me to accept the call.
Right.
So I knew it. I knew, okay, I know, Lord, you got a calling on my life. I wouldn't have called it that then, but I knew that there was something strong inside. But I knew at that time I wasn't ready to answer the call. So God didn't call me until it was His time to call me.
Right.
Praise the Lord for that.
Right.
And then, even then, I still didn't think I was that ready. But same thing with my wife. I knew she was going to be my wife, but I had to mature first.
Right.
Had I gone ahead and tried to marry at such a young age, we would be divorced by now.
Right.
Because I wasn't ready.
Right.
My
How did you know you wasn't ready? Where did you get that from? Was it because of the way you was taught or what you seen? How do you know you wasn't ready? Because a lot of people don't know they're not ready.
There wasn't a release.
Right.
It's kind of like, God will give you a release and give you peace about it. Even if you know that's going to be one day, that's going to be, but then everything has to line up.
Right.
And I didn't have peace about it then. When I finally got peace about it, it's like everything just kind of flowed.
Okay.
I think sometimes we force things, even if it's God's will. Eventually, we try to force it, and it doesn't fit right then. And we just have to wait on God's time because He sets everything up the way it needs to be set up.
That's good. That's good. That's gonna help somebody. Because there's a piece that it's like you see what you want or you see what's been promised to you, but you're not ready yet. It's almost like a parent, like, this car is gonna be yours.
Right.
You're not ready for it yet, but that's the car that's gonna be yours. And now coming into the ministry, you've been pastoring for how long now?
This is my 6th year.
6 years. And you've been in the ministry how long? How long have you been preaching?
Since I was 21, so about 20 years now.
Okay.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jeez.
How did you know that you were, because your dad is not a preacher?
No.
So it's not something that you grew up under directly,
Right.
So how did you know you were being called or chosen to preach the Word of God?